Welcome to the Bag Drop, Untold Stories in Golf. I am your mildly congested and moderately medicated host for today's episode and co-founder of New Club Golf Society, Matt Considine. And today we have a very, very special guest. Tyler Ray joins us of Tyler Ray Golf Design. Tyler's in his mid-30s. He's an up-and-coming architect in the industry. And in an industry where so few get established before they're 50, Tyler's kind of this anomaly. What he's been able to achieve and the success of his career thus far is so impressive. And I've been impressed with him for over a decade now, the work that he's been doing, and really a treat to have him on the show today. We walk through a lot on this episode. He talks about kind of how the celestial orbs align for him to even get into this industry during his time at Kentucky. All the work that he's currently doing in Chicago. Our Chicago members will be familiar with some of these staples as Northmore, Oak Park, Beverly, and Skokie. I geek out extra hard on a place near and dear to my heart with Beverly, so we get into the weeds a little bit on that one, but there's some cool things you'll learn about the project there and the other places he's working on in Chicago. And then we step outside the state of Illinois to places like Wakanda and Iowa that they're currently working on, Philadelphia Country Club, and another one near and dear to both our Atlanta members. And during the springtime, we like to pay a visit to Lookout Mountain. Yes, Tyler and Kyle Franz have been announced to take over the master plan on the restoration of that Seth Rayner at Lookout Mountain. So there's so much exciting things happening in the business and happening specifically for Tyler. So it really was a treat to have him on. I think what you'll hear throughout the conversation is his admiration and reverence for the early architects of the 1900s, and not just Donald Ross. He's become a preeminent student and an expert on Donald Ross courses, playing all but I think a handful of them. But he also just has this clear understanding of what architects of that age were setting out to do. And he touches on some of the great work of so many others, which is really a treat. Another thing that's going to be a treat, and we're all looking forward to, is our club championships. Yes, we're rounding out on the season. We got 2 club championships this year for Atlanta and Chicago. Chicago, I'm going to start off with you because you got some work to do. The cutoff is coming. Our point race is heating up. We got a whole lot of people still on the bubble, and our top 50 qualifiers from the season-long points race are going to be moving on October 3rd to our championship qualifier. Yes, the club championship this year is 2 days. It's October 3rd at Chickimine Country Club on the other side of the pond, the lake, around the corner, New Buffalo area. Chickimine is so cool. It's a 1930 Harry Collis design. If you don't know who Harry Collis is, check out one of our earlier pods this year where Paul Wellman, the historian and member of New Club, he walks us through the life and times of Harry Collis. The guy built some awesome stuff and had a real impact on the game of golf in this area. But we're going to Chickimine. Chickimine's going to be our qualifier. From the top 50 that play that morning at Chickimine, the top 8 gross scores are moving on to the match play final at, you guessed it, the Dunes Club. So our champions are going to be playing at the Dunes Club, match play until we have a winner. That's the championship flight. It's the top 8 gross. This year we're introducing the first flight, and the first flight is going to be net. It's our top 8 net that did not qualify for the gross championship. We'll be playing in a first flight championship. And we are introducing a newest tradition of the overall champion taking home some very cool hardware. We have been working for over a year with a blacksmith, an artist, a leather maker. We are trying to make something truly unique to the game of golf. And this championship belt and the corresponding hand-forged champion medals that our winners will be taking home forever, I think we did it. This is so cool to me. And so that's what you're playing for. You're playing for the glory. It's our first mixed gender championship. It might be the first mixed gender championship of any private club. And we're all having it unfold October 3rd, October 4th in the New Buffalo area for our Chicago members. Atlanta, hang tight. Your championship will be coming first week in November or second week in November. We're pinning down our venue and our dates, but that's coming up. I also should mention for Chicago, Sunday afternoon, after the Chickimine qualifier, we will be at Journeyman Distillery, and we'll be having our closing meeting of the year, kind of a party to kind of wrap things up and celebrate another great season of society golf. We'll be at Journeyman that afternoon. There will be food. There will be fun. There'll be Welter's Folly. We'll be out on the 30,000 square foot putting green. I'm sure we'll be able to turn that into a competition, and we'll be sampling the goods from our friends at Journeyman all afternoon long. Last surprise we have for all of our contestants that are qualifying for that match play final, the 16 who are moving on to the Dunes Club. They will also have complimentary dinner and lodging at the flat at Journeyman Distillery, and your golf at Dunes Club will be complimentary as well. But however, this year we have the whole flat, and this isn't like a 3-bed flat. This place is huge. It sleeps 18, 16 of you will be there. Pack a bag. This is kind of like the Bachelor or the Bachelorette. Who knows what's going to happen? Nobody knows what's going to happen. You got to pack a bag. You got to expect to play in the championship, and you want to have clean clothes. So pack your bag. The 16 will be staying at the flat at Journeyman Distillery and having a really great couple of days. So October 3rd, October 4th, circle your calendars. Without further ado, let's move on to the show with Tyler Ray. Tyler Ray, welcome to The Backdrop.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Matt.
First time having you. I've talked to you in the context of this podcast for a few years, but never having you officially on the show. So this is a real treat for me.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this as well.
I'm going to start with, you're a younger guy, and I think it's very trendy to talk about the up and comers in golf, right? Look at all the articles that are on Golf Digest, Golf Mag, more that should mention you, by the way, and what you've been doing. But I want to take it back to just falling in love with golf. And I know you're super passionate about this game, like so many of us are early in life, and it sticks with us for our entirety. But many of us that have dreamt about working in golf don't always, fulfill that dream. And for you specifically, the study of golf course architecture, the striving to be a golf course designer, where did that start for you, and how did it happen?
Well, I guess, my career, everything, my whole life has been based around golf. Both grandfathers put the club in my hand really, really early, probably 3, 4, 5 years old. And my parents would just drop me off at the public golf course growing up. And then my one grandfather had a successful restaurant, and he became a member of a private club probably when I was about 10, and I joined him there. And every year for my birthday, he'd give me kind of a 1-year membership, which was cool. And so I'd go play with him a lot. And that was a Tom Fazio course called Hartfeld National, just into Pennsylvania over the Delaware line. But basically, everything revolved around golf. I would play baseball and soccer and basketball growing up, everything, and just be outside all day. But I kind of just, was attracted to golf because, there were so many different things going on with it. You didn't have to rely on teammates. You weren't let down, or there weren't other guys overshadowing you. If you played basketball and I'm 5'11", 5'10", I knew there wasn't there wasn't longevity in that, but no. So, you kind of whittle things down, and I whittled it down pretty early, probably by about 13 or 14, and just focused on golf, and became a pretty good player, and was recruited by 12 or 15, colleges and universities. And, but I never had that next gear, and still don't. And I still don't have the next gear, but and never will probably, but I could never take it into the mid 60s like some of these guys, or the lower 60s. And I'd get 3 or 4 under par, and end up having a bogey or 2 coming in and shoot 2 under, where these guys would take it to the next level and end up 4, 5, 6 under. So I just I knew I wasn't going to be a pro. I knew I wasn't going to be a superintendent, and but I still wanted to play a lot of golf, and I loved the architecture, and I loved the different playing fields. Every golf course was different, and that was really attractive to me. Just really, you're one with the land when you're out there walking the golf course and playing, and you're with nature, and you hear the birds and the wind, and you're looking at beautiful trees, and, every landscape's different. And so that, I think, was super attractive to me, being outside my whole, always being outside growing up. And so it just gives you that good feeling, kind of that childhood feeling. But no, so I went to University of Kentucky and tried to, play for Coach Craig there. But he let me know real quick freshman year that I should probably do landscape architecture, which was the best career move, best life decision, probably. The best life decision was going to Kentucky, because I learned real quick that there was that different level, and you get put in your place real quick in the SEC. And so I learned, one, that I wasn't going to play top level college golf. And then I learned, two, that, wow, they had a good landscape architecture program. They were number 12 out of 55, I think, when I went there, so top 15. And then I went, the third greatest thing was, all right in a row there from 18 to 20 was Keith Foster had a farm, right outside Lexington in Paris, Kentucky, about 40 miles from UK. So I went to Kentucky, quickly got pushed into landscape architecture, which was great. And then quickly learned that Keith Foster was right up the road, so I could work for him when I was in college. So that's kind of the long-winded way of how I got into it. And, just, it's kind of that process of elimination where you're not gonna be a pro. You're not probably going to be a superintendent. Cause I didn't have the agronomy. I didn't have the, those guys are wizards with chemistry and all that. I mean, they're brilliant, very underrated humans. And, so architecture, that's where I went for. And it was basically like 17, 18. So it's been half my life now, or more than half my life.
That's a interesting theme that it always reoccurs on this show with guests that have been successful in golf, but also in just their career of choice is, failure elsewhere, that they learn to go at something, to fail at it and move on to the next. And not that, you sounds like you had a good career, you're a good player, but by most standards, play to a form of game that many people would admire. But yeah, you didn't make it to that team, but you certainly you fell, sounds like in the right place.
100%. Yeah. Serendipitous for sure.
We're about the same age. Was JB Holmes on that Kentucky team when you were there?
Yeah, he was a junior, I believe. He was a junior. And when I was a freshman, and I think he was NCAA player of the year, I think runner up to Ryan Moore. I know Ryan Moore had his number at UNLV. But there were a bunch of really good guys on that team. And, but yeah, JB was the standout. And, now, gosh, 4 Ryder Cups, I think 9 tour wins. He's had a good run. So I saw that next level for sure. And, there's a reason he is where he is, and there's a reason where I am.
Yeah. But both top of your games, just different games, same game, different categories. Let's just dive into Donald Ross. Right. We have a lot of Ross stops on our society schedule, both locally in Chicago, not much Ross in our other chapter, which is Atlanta, but we're making a pilgrimage to Scotland as a golf society next year. We're going to Royal Dornoch. So I want to spend some time talking about all the restoration work you've done at the dozens of iconic Donald Ross design golf courses we have in this country. I know there's quite a variety to them that you've worked on. What would you say were Ross's overarching principles, if you were going to boil it down to just a few?
Well, he, obviously he spent some time in the office or on the train before getting to a site, looking at the routing and trying to come up with a routing. He would always request a topographical map or an engineer to survey the property before he actually took the job. So I know he dealt with a lot of flat golf courses or flatter golf courses in many different parts of America, all the way down in Texas, and then all the way, obviously in Florida and then out even in Kansas. But he, I guess some overriding principles would be, to route the golf course gently, fit the golf course to the land. Usually I know he'd always build up his greens. Very seldomly do you see a green laying on the ground. And only those greens were ones that basically were already there from Bendelo or somebody else. And he just said, "Hey, it's a great green site. Let's just leave it." There's so many notes of his where I found, every day we're looking at stuff, and you see more and more where he leaves 2 or 3 greens on an existing golf course that was already there. Either it was Willie Park, who came before him, or Tom Bendelo, or Alexander Finley, somebody like that. But he had a tendency, because he was or a proclivity to leave some things, because he was a Scot and he was trying to provide value, for the owner or for the club. But if he built a new green, it was usually perched up 3, 4, 5 feet in the air for drainage. It was all about drainage, so they could grow that putting surface as tight as possible. Those old bents, German bents that they were seeding in the 20s and 30s and teens, I guess. But yeah, so I guess, he focused a lot on routing, fitting the holes to the land, some perched up greens or some really great natural green sites. Then probably other things would be leaving some key features that were on the site. So streams, he would hardly ever, bury or pipe a stream. I've seen it recently on some places where a stream or creek was in a odd spot and he would pipe it, especially later in his career. But they didn't move a ton of earth. He didn't move a ton of earth at all. But he was brilliant with, incorporating those streams, creeks, natural ponds, and then a significant tree here or there I've seen him leave. I just was up at Schuylkill Country Club in Pennsylvania, and they had one oak that was on the plan that just fell down this past year, had to be 300 years old. But Ross marked it on the plan and left it and noted it on the plan, which I've seen from time to time. So we'd use some of those features, and then old stone buildings and rock outcroppings he'd use and utilize in the routings. And then, what else? Some other principles, I guess, more principles than what he would leave or touch or do would be, strong par fours, great greens, par threes where, there's so many times he played from ridge to ridge for greens over big valleys. So it was almost like, I've always been a big fan of the UK, the Scottish, UK, British game. And when I was over there in 2009 for a long extended period, I found it fascinating how James Braid or Colt would kind of route the par threes first. And I feel like a lot of these guys did that. They found 4 great par threes. Braid was always trying to find 4 great par threes all in different directions for the wind, which was fascinating. I think Ross did that a lot too. So he probably found his par threes first, then laid out the fours. And then the other thing is there was no par. There was no par ever on a Ross scorecard. They were just golf holes, and you try to shoot the best score you could. But some other principles, back to front greens, because they had to slow down that golf ball coming in. The golf ball was coming in so much lower than people think. They weren't hitting it high and stopping it. There was no spin, and the golf courses were dry, burned out. There wasn't really irrigation, even center line, until about the 30s or 40s. There was some green irrigation, but they would land this ball 30 and 40 yards in front of the green and run it into the green. So the ground was alive. So, they put a lot of stopping action in those greens back to front. So when we see those greens, like we're going to talk about probably at Beverly, very steep, 7-8%, some of these things, but it would help slow down the golf ball. So I guess for him, some principles, steep back to front greens, and later in his career too, he interjected more contour. Early in his career, it was very basic, back to front. And as the technology grew and steel shafts came into fruition in the late 20s, he started defending his golf courses more vigorously, with more contour in his greens, more bunkers. He would move those bunkers from the side of the greens and wrap them in front, by the late 20s, probably by about 24, 25, 26. He was really evolving. But so his principles kind of evolved along with him, but the overarching stuff, great routings, fitting the course of the land, back to front greens, strong fours, great par threes. And then, I hear one thing I do want to, and I'll stop talking in a second here, but one thing I do want to talk about is, or just mention is, you hear all the time from committee members and people on Twitter and Instagram, and they say, well, Ross would always do this, or Ross would never do this. And I try to always debunk that. And I go, look, neither. Ross will fake you out and surprise you all the time, everywhere you go. And the more and more I have a handful left to see of Ross's courses. I'm almost done with the whole list, and studying him. Every time you go somewhere, he'll surprise you. And so there's not, when people say, oh, Ross always had a gentle handshake. No. Or Ross had a firm handshake to start his round. I hear that all the time. There are short fours, long fours, par fives. There's crazy holes sometimes. There's easy holes. He didn't stick to, he wasn't sticking to any rhyme or reason. He was trying to find the best 18 golf holes.
That's so funny you say that, because I'm definitely guilty as charged. One of those committee members who think that a lot, because of the 4 Ross courses I play the most, have gentle handshakes or kind of the welcoming handshake that must be Ross. And I've said it, but it's cool to hear you say that. I'm sure just at the sheer vastness and number. I mean, what is his real number, Tyler, of courses?
It's 422 as of now, maybe 423. I mean, we're finding 2 or 3 a year from old newspaper articles. As more newspapers are being digitized, we're finding more and more, and then we're finding more of his notes and stuff like that. But it was 422 I know of this spring. We might have found one more recently. But it's 422, and there's like 359 existing.
Okay. And you've seen how many of those?
I've got like 14 finally, 14 left. I had like 30 2 years ago, and I've slowed down just as work has gone through the roof, obviously the COVID deal. And there's just a couple hard ones. I haven't gotten to the mountains of Virginia or of North Carolina. There's a couple in the mountains of North Carolina I have to see. And what else? I have like 2 in New Hampshire, a couple in Canada, a couple of random ones. Yeah.
And that's just incredible for someone who is busy, has a lot going on. And we just had Tom Coyne on the podcast, and he was telling us about a course called America and his 300 plus rounds that he played. And a lot of our members' questions was just about the planning of that and how do you actually execute on that many rounds. And he did it in 8 months because he's Tom Coyne. But for the rest of us that have day jobs, what is it like for you if one of those 14 on your list that you have to get to, how do you work it into your schedule? I mean, you're going to your clients and you're doing work in the dirt, but when do you make time for that? How does it actually work for you to chip away at it?
Yeah, there's like say I'll be at Cherokee Country Club in Knoxville Monday and Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga later on Monday. And there's one called Kingsport up in the north corner of Tennessee. I think it's, oh God, I can't remember the name of it, but it's in Kingsport. I want to say I can't remember the name, but it's a good layout. And I've asked the guys at Cherokee about it. So it's about 2.5 hours from Cherokee. And I just haven't made it there, but usually I'll parlay it into a trip. So if I'm going down to Cherokee, I'll fly in the Sunday night before. I'll drive up to Kingsport at 3:30 or 4 in the morning, walk it in the morning before golfers, leave there about 9, come back down to Cherokee. It just has to work. But some of these I just went out to Kansas City Country Club a month or 2 ago, and there were 2 Rosses out there, one in Topeka, Kansas, and one in Kansas City. So I parlayed that into that trip. I flew out a day earlier with Jim Ryan, the designer, my design associate. And he was kind of squawking at me because we got up at 3:30, I think, and went out there on a Monday morning and drove out to Topeka from Kansas City and saw that one, and then came and saw Hillcrest, and then went to Kansas City Country Club about noon. And so they're long days, but you have to get it. You have to be enthusiastic, and I love it. I'm a golf junkie, like I said earlier, and it's nothing off my shirt to wake up at 3:30 because I'm so excited to go see these things. And you drive out there, and there's it might not be the greatest course in the world. It might be it might be underfunded, stuff like that. But there were 3 or 4 really good holes out there, that would made the whole trip worth it. And I was, really, really surprised at how good those 3 or 4 were and how he fit the land and how they were maybe the best 3 or 4 holes I saw that whole trip. And we saw about 8 courses, in 4 days out there. So,
and you don't always play them, right? You don't always tee it up. You're just wanting to see the holes, and does that give you enough fulfillment? I know a lot of us junkies need to have a club in our hand and see that ball fly, but do you get that fulfillment just seeing those 4 or 5 holes?
Yeah, I'll see. So obviously we walk 1 to 18, so we see it all. And we spend a lot more time on the greens, and approaches, stuff like that, because I always am interested in the greens because they're so detailed. And the routings and all that. But no, for me, it's like I always scoff at everybody when they say, "Oh, you need to play the golf course," and I go, "Well, it's twofold. It's a double-edged sword there. You could be hitting a big fade that day and be down the right side of the golf hole the whole day, and then miss a lot of greens and kind of almost pick up sometimes, if you're not playing well, and be really frustrated. Miss the whole entire left side of the golf course, any of the architecture, the whole left side of the fronts of greens, stuff like that." Or you could be playing really well and hit it right down the middle, shoot 68, and you were so into your game because you were playing one of the best rounds of your life or something like that, and you totally are oblivious to the architecture. So then it's all about how you play. People remember, really great. Oh, wow, that golf course is so good. I'm like, well, how'd you play? So when I take golf out of the equation, I feel like I'm very, I'm much more, I guess, subjective. Much more subjective. And then, I don't really miss stuff anymore. I probably used to miss some things, a roll here or there, or some of the strategy about a layup on a par 5 or going for a par 5 and 2. But anymore, we're really looking at the land. We're really looking at the rolls. We're really thinking about where the landing zones are, where the next shots are going. So it's, we'll pick out stuff too. And usually if I'm with Jim, he'll pick out a couple things, which is great. So if you go with a partner, that always helps.
Yeah. Following the trail of Donald Ross the way that you have, I have to imagine it feels like you know him, that you know the man. You already shared the kind of the debunked that he would always do something. So it sounds like that's one thing that maybe a lot of our listeners wouldn't think of. Are there other things that people just don't know about Donald Ross? 1 or 2 things that come to mind?
Yeah, I don't want to, these usually help me a lot in interviews with Ross Clubs. So I don't like to give out too much of too many tidbits, but
Secrets, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause
this is untold stories in golf though, Tyler.
Right.
We're trying to untell some of them.
Right. Cause it's funny that when you go to a Ross course and you're interviewing, you say, look, I know in my heart, there's one other guy, Brad Becken, who's seen them all. And I know in my heart, I'm probably the second guy in the world who's seen the most, truthfully. And Brad maybe looks at it in a totally different lens because he plays and, he's an older gentleman and this and that. And I look at it in a totally different way. So maybe I do have more Ross knowledge just seeing courses than most. But then I'll also throw out a lot of tidbits in those interviews, and kind of share some things that I see. But, one thing I think that probably is the overarching kind of theme or something that I've been seeing a lot lately as I evolve and get better every year. I'm very cognizant, obviously, of construction and how the contractor or the gentleman in the field, they matter tremendously to the end product. And I go to so many Ross courses, even now for like the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th time. I was just at Monroe Golf Club in Pittsford, New York, right down the street from Oak Hill. So Oak Hill East overshadows Monroe. Monroe is a fabulous Donald Ross golf course from 1922, 1923, and it's all sand. I was very fortunate to be hired by them in 2015. And before that, they had Gil Hance for about 15 years. So I followed in great footsteps and got to see a lot of what he had done and what, his plan and what he had devised for the club. The funny thing is I've probably been there 15 times, and I was there in late May, early June, and something hit me this time where I was a little disappointed how the construction, it didn't match a lot of the drawings from Ross. And we've seen this a lot, and what I finally gathered this time, I was just out there a lot on my own, probably for about 2 days. So I flew in like on a Friday and stayed till Saturday night. So I was there Friday morning till 5 p.m. Saturday, 6 p.m. Saturday. And, I got to spend probably about 7 hours on my own, just walking around, looking at things, watching a lot of golf. And I realized one thing hit me over the head, and it was like, you know what? I'm looking at this plan and Ross's drawings, and there's probably 10 holes that are spot on. And then there's about 8 that aren't. And when you look at all the old aerials, not much has been changed at all since the 30s. So this is how it was built. So why did those 8 holes not get built to Ross's drawings? So then I look at all the lineage of who was there. Well, this guy, Jim Connaughton, came over from Scotland in 1919, right? He works for Ross, I think somewhere in Boston. I want to say it was Charles River in 2120 when they built that. And I want to say Winchester, something like that. So then he comes out to Monroe and falls in love with it. And he tells Ross that, hey, I'm going to construct it for you, but then I want to be the superintendent after, because my wife loves it. My kids love it here. It's a beautiful, idyllic town, which it is. Pittsford, New York is a gorgeous suburb of Rochester. It's idyllic. So I learned all that from the past pro, Jim Merva, who had just retired. And he showed me the back of a frame. Jim Connaughton was at Monroe from 1922 to 1960, almost 40 years. So he retired there and everything. Well, what I also learned by going to a country called the Buffalo and a bunch of other courses where J.B. McGovern was in charge of the construction. He was one of Ross's like 3 top guys, construction foreman. He built Aronimink, other ones like that. What I've seen from him is a proclivity, a tendency to kind of break up bunkers, 60-foot long bunkers by 30, 60 by 30, right? 1,800 square foot bunkers. He'd break them into 2s and 3s sometimes. And I'm not sure why, but I've seen it at Jeffersonville, Aronimink, Country Club of Buffalo. Like 15 courses, probably 20 courses. And so I see J.B. McGovern's breaking up of bunkers. So I see all things that he'd done. But then hit me over the head that I think, I said, you know what? I bet Jim Connaughton had a heavy hand in this because it was all sand and you could really, really motor. They got the job done in like 6 months. They broke ground in May of 22 and it was seeded by October. And then they hit the first golf ball July 4th the next year. So it was like a rapid building. That's another reason I think they went too fast. And it was all sand, so they could just motor. Okay. But the greens are perched up. They're beautiful. They're incredible. But there's 7 or 8 greens that don't have the interest of some of the others, and they don't match the plan. And then there's a bunch of bunkering that's a little off, and just the details, a lot of details I was really disappointed with. And so it's so hard for me to tell Monroe that because they want to be top 100 and everything, and they can be. But I'm almost like, I think J.B. McGovern and Jim Connaughton, actually hurt the final product because Jim was going to maintain it for the rest of his life. He probably wanted to make it a little easier to maintain, little things like that. And so I come to this conclusion, and sorry for the really long-winded answer here, but I come to this conclusion with them, and I'm like, well, what do we do? What do I do as an architect? Do we put this puppy back to Ross and make it as spectacular as drawings are? His drawings are otherworldly. Or do I honor the aerial and just say, well, I guess it's not going to be that good because Jim Connaughton got involved a little too heavy-handedly, and same with J.B. McGovern. So it's what a fine line there. And so I don't know, and then do they and the thirdly, do they have the stomach to blow up some of these greens and spend $2 million instead of $800? Or spend 2.5 instead of 800 and really make it as good as it can be. Yeah. I don't know, but the Ross drawings are otherworldly.
There's one thing that, because I've got to see, your presentations, I've gotten to see how you work to a degree and get buy-in from memberships. And I talked with your design associate, Jim Ryan, about this as well. It's just that whole interaction with the committees, and
a lot of people would say in traditional business, the customer's always right, and if they're willing to pay us for something, I mean, we've heard this in golf course architecture and construction in the past, right? If so-and-so has $1 billion and they want to pay me X for doing Y, they're the customer, they're the client. But there's what I've seen in your guys' process, and your process specifically, Tyler, is there's conviction to doing the right thing for history, for longevity, for not just the loudest members, but the other members as well. And it's admirable, because I know it doesn't make things easy. But I think my question here is, when you're going into those meetings, knowing that, there's a percentage that'll agree, a percentage that won't, does that ever change what you present? Or is it always, are you starting with those Ross drawings and starting with the original intentions? Is that like kind of your beacon, if you will, of true north?
Yes. If you have the drawings, I mean, that he drew them himself, usually on the train ride to the next course, and he would usually spend 3 days on that golf course, when he was hired and routing the golf course. So, usually if you have that, that's spectacular, and we want to honor that. And then if we have some really great aerials or ground shot photography, we want to look at that. And then there's usually periodic newspaper articles from the period, from the day. Like Beverly, we had a plethora of newspaper articles talking about his changes to the golf course and this and that. And we know Beverly was pretty much 13 or 14 holes of George O'Neill, the prior pro, who went on to design Barrington Hills and other great golf courses himself. And then Ross only came in, he came in 1918, 1919 and only rerouted 5 holes. But he did make them a lot better. So it's really a George O'Neill course with, Ross coming in and tinkering. They were flat greens on the ground though, and Ross was responsible for all the greens. So to me, it's okay. It's a big, 14, 15, 13 holes are George O'Neill, 5 are Ross rerouting, but it's all of Ross's greens, and they are spectacular and bold. So, but yeah, we want to look at Ross drawings, the history, newspaper articles, aerials, and then kind of get like, okay, take them all and get a game plan, and figure out our avenue and what's going to be the story. You have to have a story that's believable and that everybody's going to run with and be excited about. But for me, as I get, further into my career and all that, there's been those circumstances where the club hasn't, decided, no, I wouldn't say the proper thing, but they haven't, they've been, maybe they didn't want to spend the proper amount of money, or they didn't want to do this, and it's just good enough. We understand where you're coming from, Tyler, but then you sit in that bulldozer or excavator for the whole job and you're just pissed off the whole time. You're kind of like, I know this can be better. And it just grinds you down, because when something can be better, I mean, what's worse in life? Failed potential. I saw it was something funny that resonated with me maybe 2 years ago. I saw a bumper sticker, and it was something really funny, like never realizing my full potential, just on the bumper sticker. And I was like, gosh, like every day you got to strive we have so much potential. We should strive to get up early, get out of bed and grind, work our tails off and be the best we can be. And this is the same with the restoration. It's like, if we have all these tools and we have all this evidence of how great this golf course was or could be, let's do it. It's liberating when clubs like Beverly give you the keys and they say, okay, we know what our hole 12 was like. We see the old photos of how bold that par 3 12th was. And it was 108 yards in the US Amateur in 1931, but it was like, they were like cliffs falling off that green. And we had a photo of Francis Ouimet's competitor, I think in the semis. He got in the front bunker on 12, and the green literally is like 10 feet above him, and he couldn't get out. He left one in there and then got out, and he had 5 on that hole, and Francis Ouimet had a 3 and won the hole, and I think almost closed him out, something like that. But it was a meaningful hole. Now I remember seeing that photo and being like, this thing was a little volcano, and somebody had lowered it and tinkered with everything on that hole. But luckily, fortunately, the membership allowed us to, hey, we trust you guys. You're the, like Andrew Lewis and some of the great Tom Holub, some of the great members there, and Green Committee chairman and president. They said, we hired you for a reason. You guys are the experts. Let's roll. And Ron Pritchard, that was our last job together. He gave me a ton of freedom. He kind of just let me do my thing. And we argued a lot about some things, and we butted heads on some things like architects do. But in the end, I think the product is probably the best of my career and hopefully the best of Ron's.
And from the lowly member perspective, I'll just share my 2 cents on something like 12. I've walked past that picture that they put up prior to you guys doing the work there. And being a golf junkie, golf nerd, like so many of us, you just say, how cool is that? How cool is that? The feeling of actually, seeing the picture of that competitor in the 1931 bunker and then actually being in it. The golf's the one thing where you get to play in the artwork. I think that's the main thing that has got me into architecture, like so many of us over the last couple of years, is you don't just look at it, don't just appreciate it, go play it. And that hole in particular, man, every time someone gets to it now, it almost does drive me nuts though. Cause like, the term signature, it gets tossed around, and I know you hate it. I hate it. Everybody, most people do, but every time I'm with a guest or somebody, they're like, look at this hole. Holy crap. This has to be your signature hole. I go, no, it's just a good par 3, guys. It's just a good par 3.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We're just, it's just a good par 3 in Chicago and fun, old volcano hole like Ross would do, and build.
You mentioned earlier the early Ross, later Ross, that he had different ways of doing things throughout his career. Most of Chicago's courses are early Ross, I believe. What are those characteristics of early Ross that our listeners would look out for the courses they see around here?
Yes, you're correct, Matt. I think his last work might have been Beverly in Chicago. It might have been, because we had thought for a while he had built LaGrange, but that was debunked, and that was 21. So I always thought LaGrange was his last work in Chicago, but I think Beverly was in 1919. So odd that he never came back, but I think he had so much work there early in his career. I think he'd had 11. I think because it was 12 with LaGrange, so I think it's 11 now that we've figured that out. But so 11 courses in Chicago, and it was all between 1913 and 1919. And his name obviously blew up because he built Old Elm for Colt, in 1913. And then literally everybody called Oak Park in 1914, Skokie 1914, Ravislow, I believe. I mean, it was just 5 or 6 clubs called him, right after that, and then Evanston, even Lakeshore, Northmore was 1918, stuff like that. Exmoor, I think, was early 1914. So, he had a ton of work in Chicago, but then never came back. So Chicago is kind of representative of his early period. So there's kind of 3 periods, I always say. Early period, he emigrated, obviously, April of 1899, and he just only worked in Boston pretty much that first year. And then he went down to Pinehurst for the Tufts in 1900, 1901, and found sand and was like, oh, this is totally different than Boston. And it's not clay and rock and cold and wet. And so he, but from probably about 1899 to the First World War, or so 1919, maybe 1918, 1919, right when he was finishing Beverly, probably is his first period. And it is represented by fewer bunkers in number. So 30, 39, 40, usually under about 60 bunkers, but they were big in scale. 2,800 square feet, 3,000 square feet, long linear, like submarines out there, angled submarines, kind of perpendicular to play. So sometimes they're 80 feet wide by 20 feet deep. And not too sexy, nothing too crazy, just the dirt that they scooped out from the bottoms that created the cavity, created the shoulders. And he would fit them into the landforms and read the ground. but they were more flanking bunkers. So when your dispersion, your ball dispersion would kind of go off the hole, they would kind of catch you, keep you in play. There were a lot of 4 bunkers kind of to test all skill levels, the females, the juniors, the older duffers, they would call them. He wanted to test all skill levels, all players, all handicaps. So he would have, sometimes 5 to 15, we call top shot bunkers or 4 bunkers. And he'd have a couple fairway bunkers that were meaningful. And then at the green, every green was open in the front up until about 1919. And he would flank the green on both sides, not up against the green. Like we're thinking, you have the green and then you fall off in the bunkers. We're talking about the approach is flanked. They would kind of be at a, almost like if you're playing, not skee ball, but like an arcade game, how you have the flippers, kind of guiding you into the hole.
Pinball.
Yeah, pinball. So they would be kind of these pinball bunkers. And if you were just off, because you were running that ball in from 30, 40, 50 yards out. So if you were just off with your line, the ball may funnel into those bunkers. So really, really cool. So that's, and then back to front, steep, 6, 7, 8, 10%, squarish, very squarish, in the back, built up 5 feet. The front might be at grade. And then just 1 or 2 tees, and sometimes very long. I've read a lot of his notes where they were 100 feet long, just one long runway tee. So when people say, again, another fallacy, RTJ was known for his runway tees. Dude, Ross started that. He had runway tees all over in the start of his career, especially on his flatter courses. When it was super hilly, obviously you can't put a runway tee that's 100 feet long or 100 yards long. But he would generally say, 30 feet wide by 100, or 30 feet wide by 120. So those are, 40-yard long tees, 30-yard long tees, way before RTJ. And then, so then you get to 1918, and the second period, it's like 1918 to 1931, probably the start of the Great Depression. Yes, Great Depression was November 29. So we're talking, golf really didn't feel the effects until after his Seminole job or Mountain Ridge job, maybe Jeffersonville. Those 3 jobs were 30, 31 that finished. Seminole, I think, started in 29, finished maybe 30, 31. Same with Mountain Ridge, same with Jeffersonville. Those are 3 iconic, really, really great works of art where they were on such a roll. But from anyway, so 1919 to 19, you can almost break the second period up into 2 periods, because from 1919 to 24, that 5-year period, he was still getting out of that first transition and transitioning into more bunkering, up to 100 bunkers, 120 bunkers on some golf courses, breaking up tees, more tees, more interjecting more character into his greens, and then putting bunkers in front of greens, because he knew it wasn't all about running the ball in. It was more aerial. As people got stronger, golf took a foothold in America. People were lofting the ball a little more. More clubs came out. Bobby Jones and his what was that? His little wedge that he kind of came up with. So these guys were coming up with more like sand wedge type clubs. But then you get to about 24, because he had this massive boom, like the COVID boom. So we just went through the 100 years later of the same COVID deal. And we're really literally in the exact middle of our COVID boom in golf. They had the exact same boom, 1919, 20, 21. Ross built 39 courses in 21.
And you're talking about the flu.
Spanish flu was COVID, 1918, 17, and so he lost a ton of projects in 17 and 18 because of the war and then Spanish flu. I mean, he had 6, he went from 15 in 1915, I think. The numbers are kind of funny when you look at the graph, though. You could look at the numbers by year of courses that I've kind of mapped out, because I just wanted to see where he was at, what he was doing, why he was changing, just trying to figure everything out. And but there was that Spanish flu boom, and he had 33 new courses, I think, in 1921, 5 rebuilds or renos, and then 1 3-hole touch up. So unbelievable. He never had more work in his life than 1920, 21, but it was that 2 years removed from the Spanish flu.
Wow.
kind of the same thing we're in right now, where golf is king. Anyway, so by about 24 though, he really turned the notch up. Like 24, 25, he like literally went, okay, I'm seeing what Rayner's creating, with Fisher's Island and all that stuff, and Camargo and all these really extremely bold golf courses. I see what Langford and Moreau are doing. These guys were really coming on 21, 22, 23, 24 before Rayner died in early 26. But what Langford and Moreau was doing, Rayner definitely, I think, had a major, major influence on him. So he started getting really bold. Then we see the Aronimings in like 27, Mountain Ridge, Seminole, Plainfield. His list from 25 to 31 that's almost all of his best work. I think Oak Hill was 24, stuff like that. So if you look at some of his best stuff, Scioto was early, but I knew he came back, in some other places. Wannamoisett, he came back in 28, redid all the greens, and they're probably the best set of Ross greens out there, Wannamoisett, stuff like that. So anything he touched from 24 to 31 is very special and has a great deal of well thought out greens, putting surfaces and great routings. Then it's kind of like the dark ages. So, period 3 or 3.5 is from 31 to his death in 48. And you see bulldozers coming to fruition. He used this bulldozer for the first time in 1933 at Allegheny in Pittsburgh. And you can see like huge cuts out there on the back nine. Unbelievable. Where he made like 30-foot cuts and fills. It was the first time he ever used a dozer. And then that replaced the teams of horses with the scoops. And then instead of throwing 200 guys on a project, they threw 40. And then they had big equipment, the steam shovel, the dozer, stuff like that. So kind of the dark ages of golf was beginning, and so you see stuff like Mark Twain up in New York was a Works WPA golf course in 37. Bunch of others, where it's just the details aren't there. Everything's smooth and bland. The greens don't have that cool, perched up, old school look to them. Everything was kind of rudimentary, built with the big stuff, and then it was all about time and money. The only one that probably survived out of the WPA and, kind of after 31 was George Wright up in Boston. That was like 37, 38, 39, but it took like 3 years and they had a ton of labor they just threw on it. They had a ton of rocks to clear. They built like all the stone walls around the whole perimeter with all the rocks. So that was about the only really great one after 31, in my opinion. And the other ones are good. Like the back nine at Irondequoit, he did late in his career and some other stuff. They're good, but they don't have that supreme old school, vibe.
Yeah. I got to say, the vast amount of information that resides in Tyler Ray's head of golf, Donald Ross, is it like other things though? Like where if we were to ask you about baseball or cricket, you got no room for anything else. It's like, sorry, Donald Ross occupies 3/4 of my brain. I can't give you anything else.
Yeah. Donald Ross, but it's also all the old golden age architects. Yeah. Before, when I was interviewing for Wakanda, I went and visited every Langford and Moreau I could see. Almost every one, and just trying to learn what they were up to and maybe how they were evolving, Langford and Moreau, stuff like that. Same with Flynn when we were interviewing for Philly Country Club, and I've been fortunate to work on a couple Flynns and just go on study trips and study and see every Flynn you can. And same with right now. What are we into right now? Oh gosh. Perry Maxwell stuff, really into that. But no, just trying to always figure out what they were thinking.
It's fascinating. I can just pick up. You're an investigator on this stuff. You just want to get to the truth on it, and you're digging hard. One thing that never really crossed my mind when I consider all these places is how competition worked into it, and how Ross was watching Langford, and how Rayner was influencing the Flynn. Like I'd never really considered the actual place and time, and you have to, for what you do, you have to put them all together.
Yeah. Matt, I always look at what was being built within the year before and year after. because these guys, there was so much writing out there. I mean, Tillinghast and Tilly. Oh, that's pretty much the one that we're in right now because of Kansas City Country Club, and we're deep diving into Tilly right now, and I'm rereading Phil Young's book on Tilly, stuff like that, and all his writings. But yeah, and seeing every Tilly we can, and going up to Wingfoot again to study Wingfoot and Quaker and Fenway, stuff like that, and Philly cricket and Somerset Hills and some of his best stuff. But and Baltimore, I just lined up Baltimore Country Club, 5 Farms, to go see that again. Hadn't seen it since probably 07, but now that we're doing a master plan for Kansas City Country Club, which was a 25 Tillinghast, it's like I want to see everything that was from 24 to 26 in his career. Like, where was he at? And then the stuff before, and then the stuff after, obviously. But yeah, we're investigators, and then I don't know. We just try to figure out what was going on that time period, what they're influenced by. Why, I guess. Why did they do this here? Almost every time, Matt, it comes down to funding. They didn't have the proper funding. The golf course didn't get built properly. Almost every time, just like how it is now. So funding was always number one. But then there's always some other circumstances, like Rayner dying. Like Lookout Mountain was 3/4 done when Rayner died. So we see why a couple things didn't come out perfect there. And we're going to try to put that back. And it was tough to get to up to Chattanooga. Lookout Mountain is up there, especially with train travel back then. And Rayner obviously died from exhaustion and pneumonia because he was overworked. I mean, he was just on fire and going everywhere. But yeah, definitely.
That's amazing.
Just always trying to figure stuff out. So.
All right, I got to sneak in my Beverly questions because obviously that's a place that's very near and dear to my heart. What aspects of your work at Beverly are you most proud of?
Ooh, gosh, that's a great question. Probably the scale. I think scale is lost. I think so many architects that, like when a club calls me to come in and interview, and you go there and you go, hey, kind of like, why are you getting rid of the other architect? Why are you moving on? And they kind of give you some reasons, this and that, but then you can kind of really start looking at what they missed or what they didn't knock out of the ballpark. And almost the number one thing I see is scale, boldness. So Beverly in the old aerials had these incredible big bunkers, scale, big greens, big fairways. It was a big boy course. I mean, 6,600 yards back in the day in 1919. That would translate, because it's 18% is the number right now, is the translation to our game. So it'd be 8,000 yards. You imagine playing that? Luckily, they had no irrigation like we talked about earlier. And so the ball would run out. I mean, they would hit it 300 back then because the ball would run 120 yards. So if we didn't have irrigation, imagine how far your drives would go right now.
Yeah.
Guys are hitting at 330, but it'd be like they'd hit 400 yarders. So playing an 8,000 yard course, I mean, a lot of these guys are playing 8,000 on tour soon, 7,800. So it's kind of funny how that's going.
Yeah, and you're helping me realize some other things too, like the slope of the green back to front, right, Ross, that we see so often. That was to stop the ball. It wasn't to piss us off when we're short-sided long or
right.
or spin the ball off the. I mean that's now the challenge has almost shifted in a way, right? Where it was something to help you. Now you can't hold a green if you're hitting a 60 degree.
Controlling spin.
Spin. It's other ways than distance that our game has changed, I guess.
Correct. So, but yeah, it's fascinating. A couple other things I guess I'm proud of. It's definitely scale. I mean, I shaped every bunker, every green expansion, I was there, 4 days a week. I felt like more, but, the bunkers I'm really proud of. There's so much detail and character in them. And I love when they mow them and then the sun kind of hits them late in the day and you can kind of see all the wrinkles and ripples. I know Ron Pritchard was getting after me a little bit because he's like, look, we try to obviously put back period style stuff. And he's like, 1918, 1919, was Ross putting that much stuff in them? That much character in this stuff? Are you putting too much character in these bunkers, Tyler? We were probably overthinking it, but I was like, well, Ron, I want them to look like the horse and scoop, the team of horses in the scoop. kind of scooped these things up, and they kind of eroded a little bit. And we've seen so many old photos too from the 20s of these great old Ross courses that were like right after built, and they're very steep and very rugged, and they kind of have those humps and hummocks. So I just tried to make it look period style, but I'm really proud of that when I go out late at night, afternoon out of Beverly, and they fit really well into the landforms. So one thing I see a lot is other architects and teams shape everything with excavators. When you shape everything with an excavator, you have a really tough time tying things into hillsides and landforms. I shape a lot with a bulldozer, because if you think about the team of horses, the 2 horses, and then the 4.5 yard scoop or whatever, how big I can't remember how big, 3.5 yard scoop, they would pull this stuff up, and it's identical to the dozer blade, literally. And so I'm just taking the dozer blade and scooping out the dirt from the cavity of the bunker and pushing it up. Same exact process. And so they would tie things out and blend these things into these rolls in the hillsides and make them look like the bunkers were always there. And so I spent a ton of time tying things in, and my disturbance areas might get a little bit bigger, but I'm tying things into these shoulders so they look like they're just blended into the shoulder. And where I'm shaping with a bulldozer, I think that's a game changer, where these guys are shaping the excavator and they just pack the stuff in, and and then they kind of have things that aren't tied in, that aren't blended in really well. So I think that is a big difference, and I'm really proud of that when I go out there and look at that.
I think I have the ultimate compliment for you on that work. Is my brother-in-law ordered me Andy Johnson's print. Andy did a nice, I think he said it was one of his best pictures ever taken. It was looking down 8 with Chicago city skyline in the background. You get 5 green, you get 6 green in the distance. And it's just, those landforms are the sun's hitting it. It's a sunrise, but it's hitting it so perfectly. Well, my brother-in-law, his sweetheart, he got me that for Christmas. Perfect Christmas gift. I open it, and the rule in our house to date has been, golf stuff goes in this room I'm sitting in, right? You can hang it, but it's got to be in your wall and not out. My wife loved that picture so much, Tyler. She said, can that go in the living room?
Oh, wow.
The living room, because it's not just, it's a work of art, my friend. So I think that's the ultimate compliment from the Considine house.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I love hearing it.
I want to ask one question about that hole, about number 8, because this is bugged at me a little bit. Just I like you, I got to know the why. 8 green, monster green, right? Back to front, maybe 60 yards. It's expansive. I played with Paul Richards, our past golf historian, and I think he confirmed for me that the original Ross green was punch bowl-ish in the front portion of that green, and we later added the back part of that green. Could you walk me through? Because it is unique. It's kind of one of those holes that just lays where it is, right? But the landforms around that are so cool. And I think of your work, Tyler. The 8th hole really was one that maybe didn't jump out at people during the round, and now it really does. But that green, I just want clarity on what was the conversation and what was the original from your understanding and to build it the way it was.
Yeah, so we did find we were very fortunate that U.S. Amateur in 1931, they had so much ground level photography, and so we had a shot of Francis Ouimet in the right greenside bunker. And the right greenside bunker was depressed below kind of the punch bowl, and it had a kicker there. But we had him, hitting his shot out onto that kind of punch bowl green. So you're correct in that it was a front punch bowl green. And this is what I got back to probably 40 minutes ago. That was probably a Bendelow and then probably a George O'Neill green that he left. So maybe he didn't blow up every green at Beverly. Maybe he did leave that one. So that thing just sat right on the ground, right at grade, almost like a big punch bowl. The water would almost run through it, front to back and then go off the back. And I believe in the 80s or 90s, the back was expanded, probably because of turf quality. That usually is the pusher on that, but it probably was a punch bowl, probably wet. And they said, "Oh, this is always so beat up. Let's expand it. We have all this room." So somebody expanded it. They did a pretty good job of it. And that was one in the meeting where I wanted to get rid of in the membership meeting and say, "Look, we got to get back to the original, straight up beat correct to the heritage. Let's put this puppy back right to the 31 U.S. Amateur. Let's make it spectacular. And that was met with a lot of resounding, I guess, blowback. And the membership said, look, this is one of our favorite greens. We understand it's a mutt. And the front is original, but the back isn't. But let's just keep the back for now, and you do whatever you got to do with the rest of it. So I gave a concession there. I said, okay, I realize you guys love it. It is what it is. So that's what happens sometimes, and you have to stand really firm. I stood my ground on 12 and a bunch of other holes, and was really, really hardcore about a lot of stuff. And so there's some give and take sometimes, but that one, it didn't bother me. It's just more green space, more flagstick locations. It might not play original in the back, but the front does. So, you know what? It is what it is, and it's still a great golf hole.
Yeah. One last comment on Beverly before we move on. Number 11, I feel like was a beast of a par 5, no matter how you shaped it. I mean, it always has been, but at almost 600 yards, and the work you did, I actually came out the day and you were on the dozer shaping those bunkers. And what immediately caught my attention was that this hole now has the potential to have 3 blind shots when you're not on that favorable side of the fairway, and you're on the side of the fairway that has more tilt to where your ball's not going to be level. If you go down, if you take on the OB and you're in a flat spot, you get to kind of see the hole, and it is more strategic opportunity to play it. But I wonder if you could just tell me about that hole, because the other area that I'll leave for you to comment on is the green. And it feels like it is back to front, but with the reverse thumbprint, or what you might call it, in the center of it. I'm just curious, how Ross is that?
Oh yeah. I'll go back to front.
Okay.
So the little dome, the little bump, is very Ross. There's one in the second green at Northmore. There's one at Tuujica. There's one at Barton Hills. There's probably 10 of them, probably 20, 30 out there. But I see it very often, how one little bump in the middle of the green can really change the whole green, affect every putt. The one at Northmore is very, it's softened over time, and I'm going to bring that back this fall and use that. But no, the one at Beverly, there's a couple bumps in some greens at Beverly, ironically. There's a little spine in 17. There's a little, where else has a little bump? Well, definitely 11. And then, gosh, I feel like 6, kind of, not really. It's number 9 really doesn't have one, but yeah, it's a trait that I see often. And I actually incorporated it into your short course that we're building because I love that green so much. But 11 green has this great little bump. You can almost get them on the back, and they break towards the back when you have a side to side putt, and you're like, wait a second, this thing looks like it's 12% going to the front, and then your putt breaks towards the back, and it just flummoxes you. So fantastic green. We got like 20, 30 feet back in those wings on the corner. So the green expansion really, really got that green expanded. So it has these backboards and these wings kind of, that's spectacular. But the bunkering, we felt like, I just feel like there was a bunker off the tee about 200 that was really, really penal. And it was kind of blind. And if you got in it, ruined the hole. So we eliminated that bunker. It wasn't original. It was put in at some point in the 80s, 70s. So we eliminated that. And then we tried to put back everything original. So you do have a blind tee shot over these kind of spectacle bunkers, which you can kind of walk, the Grote Trail right through, which is cool, kind of broken up, fitting in that landform there, kind of taking your aim where you want to. OB all down the right, OB all down the right, really long. But then we had some bunkerings, a smattering of bunkers. There was no really rhyme or reason to the layup. And so we felt like, if we cut down a lot of these trees on the left, there's going to be nothing on the left. And people will just play down, 15 of those. So we had a great landform at about 100, 110, 120, and we stuck a bunker back in there. that we think we couldn't tell on the aerial photography it was there or not. It was really hard to determine. We could see a lot of the other stuff, but sometimes the shadowing, it's really tough. But we put one back in that hillside now. So you hit it off the tee and you have to obviously hit a great tee ball. And then the layup, if you're trying to go for the green, you have to hit over that left bunker, or you have to stay right of it, because if you're short of it, it sits on that high landform and blocks your view of everything. So then with that OB down the right, it really makes it exacting for that layup. You really have to hit a really good layup, and your ball is all funneled towards the right bunker along that. That's kind of offset a little bit from that. So we feel like it's a really good 3-shotter. I think the hardest thing for golf architects is to make par fives enthralling, or good. It's easy to make 4 great par threes. It's easy to make some great par fours and some drivable fun par fours, but it's really hard to make 4 good par fives. Or 3 good par fives, or 2 good par fives if it's par 70. But for that one, we always thought, it was just kind of a slog, and we just wanted to have each shot, your tee ball, your approach, and then your shot from the green, thoughtful. So
let's shift gears to another society staple of ours. We head down south to Ravislow Country Club, and it's been public since I moved to Chicago, and I have a very long relationship with Rav, because it was I remember the summer it turned public, and I was just a kid working in telecommunications sales, trying to make some dough and looking to play some golf. And this place, I was in love on day one, and it was in great shape, and they just restored the bunkers in 2007, I believe. So I was like, how about this? I didn't have public golf like that in Northeast Ohio, or there was, I just didn't know where to go. But my question is, from your standpoint, as the guy that's doing this restoration on so many iconic Ross courses, the funding for public, give me some insight to what are the chances of a place like Ravislow or a place like Manakiki in Cleveland, or these very public Rosses? What are the percentage chances that they actually get the funding to not just do a restoration, but to do it right? As you said, that's always what it's come down to. Is it disheartening at all that these places probably won't be able to get the funding in the short term, or do you think, or is it more optimistic than that?
It is, they do get their shot, but it's once every 20, 25, 30 years, usually. I have a rare one at Jeffersonville outside Philadelphia. That's a public, and we're kind of doing a couple holes here and there and bunkers. And so I'm there kind of every spring and fall, just shaping and working with a superintendent. So we're making that, and massive green expansions, fairway expansions. So a lot of grassing lines, bunkering, rebunkering it. So we're fortunate there where they're giving us 100, 150 a year to really be judicious with and be smart with and help continually make it great. But yeah, places like Ravislow or Manakiki, they get I know Manakiki probably was done in the late 90s, and that is a fantastic Ross, by the way. That land is unbelievable. And last time I was there, I got rained out and had to walk the last couple of holes, and I was the wettest I've ever been in my life. I had to go back to the hotel and get the hairdryer out and dry off everything to dry off and go to the airport. But so I need to get back there and see that again, because that was a tough day. But yes, I think they get their one shot at glory, every 25 years, and they just have to be really smart. And unfortunately, it's usually some people who don't really play golf who are kind of running the show, and they go for the cheapest option, and then they set themselves back another 25 years. So you have to have really great planners, and like the guys at Jeffersonville, they have an incredible township manager and a great superintendent, great pro, and they all get it. And, they host awesome events with the Golfers Journal. And I think No Laying Up was just there this weekend, stuff like that. And your society is probably, super welcome all the time. And they just get it. They love golf. And I just wish more townships and municipalities cared a little bit more. Yeah, it's tough. It is tough.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's also it's important that we do have some of this compelling architecture and these accurate accounts of history for our public courses as well, so that they can feel a part and a piece of this game in our country, which has such a, I think you put it, idyllic past and something that we, people aspire to. And then they understand what's so special about these other places that they aspire to become members at and play.
Exactly.
The list of, we touched on a lot of Ross. I do got to ask about these other guys that you have learned quite a deal about, and you've touched on many of their courses, or you've done work at. So Rayner, you already talked about Tillinghast. I read last night the Strantz brothers. Have you worked on a course of theirs? And I'm just curious, the aspects of these other architects that you admire most.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, there were so many. Flynn's probably actually my top. Because Shinnecock, and I mean, gosh, you think about his list. His top 5 is pretty hard to beat. The Country Club of Brookline, Philadelphia Country Club, Huntington Valley, Lancaster. There's some unbelievable ones. Obviously you got Cherry Hills, stuff like that. But Flynn is spectacular. He's probably my favorite. And growing up in Philly, there's so many Flynns. There's 10 Flynns around me. But then, Ross is right there nipping on his heels. No only knock on Ross is he did so much work. There's 422 courses that we mentioned. Flynn probably did 100, so 1/4 of what Ross was working on. So I think Ross was a little overstretched. I think he took on all that work just to provide work for his crew. He had 2,000 guys at one point in his company, which is mind-boggling. So I think he's just a little too kind and took too much. But and then Tillinghast, when he was focused, obviously we see his product with Wingfoot and Somerset Hills and Philly Cricket, Baltimore Five Farms. It just doesn't stop. Sonny Hanna. I mean, the Tilly list is incredible too. And he was very, influential at Pine Valley, stuff like that. Colt, I think Harry Colt's probably the best, to throw a curveball in there, because he was so UK. But we just saw, the Tokyo Olympics, where his disciple Charles Allison went over there, and, they built Kawana Fuji and, Hirono, stuff like that. That's incredible. And, and then their prowess in the UK obviously is unparalleled with Sunningdale, stuff like that. But then you go over to, Amsterdam, and you have Japan, which is incredible. And a bunch of others that Colt had his hand on, and then Tom Simpson over there. There's just, the top 10 there's so many good guys. It's almost unbelievable, and Rayner's great. I'm not the biggest template guy. I love one-offs in a hole that you've never seen before, just fitting the land and kind of ending up in a funky location or something. So I'm more of into that. But there are great templates. Like we're out at Camargo last week. I hadn't been there since college, so I haven't been there since 04 or 05, 03. And it was great to see again with like what I thought about what Camargo and Cincy, then, and then what I thought now. And it was two totally different things, and I saw a lot more now and felt like I could understand a lot more. And, but Rayner died halfway through that, so there's no fairway bunkers hardly at Camargo, so it's a little underwhelming in some aspects, but anyway, but no, the top 10 is interchangeable for me. I mean, they're all incredible. They all had so many great projects. Stanley Thompson, he's so underrated. He's an incredible architect that we didn't see enough from, but still, like when you go up to Cape Breton, the Highland Links, I was up there a year or two ago. It's absurdly good, and so it's cool. It's just great to see this stuff. Like then you go to Paris, you go to Fontainebleau, and Morfontaine, with Simpson. And it's like Morfontaine, that thing should be top 10 in the world, which it might be, but it should be. So it's just cool. That's why we love this game so much.
Lookout Mountain. I got to ask about you're teaming up there, right? With Kyle, France. And it's a special place for our golf society. So we've been going down there since our first ever spring meeting, which is held at Sweetens Cove. But the folks, we have a few mutual members who are over at Lookout, so we always make a stop. And man, it's when I heard the good news that it's official that you guys are headed there, I was, giddy to see what the work's going to be in our next visit. But also I was like, that's such a sight. Like, where do they start? So where do you start, Tyler? Like what has you most excited about that project, and what are the steps?
Yeah. Probably the most exciting, when you go to a new course and interview, you're looking at the land, the land and the routing, because if they have those two basics if they have that, if those two are spectacular, you can really work with the other stuff. And you can always rebuild greens. You can always build bunkers, stuff like that. Remove trees. But yeah, if we remove some trees and do some proper tree removal and kind of tree management and expose some of those incredible views, where you can see for hundreds of miles up on that mountain, I think that'll separate them a little bit. And then, Brian Silva was in there in the late 90s, early 2000s and did a pretty darn good job of bunkering. I think he's pretty darn good with Rainer. And sometimes he gets a little too square with his stuff, where Rainer really, that's such a fallacy where people think, every bunker Rainer did, he's an engineer, was square. It's total opposite. You go to courses that are untouched, like Camargo or Fishers, they're big submarines and they have a lot of waviness to them, a little more natural, like National Golf Links, where he learned everything. So there's some fallacies there too, that a lot of architects, like, I don't want to name names, but they're working at other Rainers and they just put all square stuff back. And you're like, okay, I guess you went somewhere and saw that, and that place had been redone, and it had been redone improperly. And you saw that because you haven't seen every Rainer, and that's your thought of Rainer. So when people don't go and see everything or try to see everything and make their own opinion, that's where they go wrong. And then
Full picture.
The squareness thing is all blown out of proportion. But when you go see West Hampton and this stuff, because Gil's doing it right, Gil restored West Hampton and a bunch of Fishers and a bunch of others, nothing square, and they have character and stuff like that in the back shoulder. But then you see other stuff, it's kind of disappointing. But I didn't mean to go on a tangent, to get back to Lookout, you get the views, because their number one asset is the views. You get those put back, spectacular. The routing's already spectacular. We got to rebuild the greens because they've been monkeyed with a lot over the years, and the templates are kind of melted. Like there's no thumbprint or horseshoe in the short, and we think there was, and it's kind of really monkeyed with now and holds water and a bunch of other things going on. So we want to push the greens all the way out to their fill pads, rebuild the greens, float them out, get some of the templates back that we think they had, get back some of the bunkering, because we did have a Rainer plan, which is spectacular. It was called Fairyland Golf Course, which is really cool. So one of the rare Rainer plans. So we're going to get that back. And Gil took over there. I think the funny story for me that was really great going down there to interview last December and January was, they said, hey, we're looking for an architect, this or that, go around our golf course, give us your thoughts. And I said, hey, I was in Keith Foster's office in 2007 when you called him. I remember that whole interview process 14 years ago, and Gil beat out Keith Foster. And so I remember that whole interview process. I remember doing a lot of research about it. I remember Keith Foster going down there, and they picked Gil because he was young and up and comer in 2007. Consequently, they had no money, so they never did anything. So Gil kind of stepped away a couple years ago. And now they've gotten to a point where their greens keep dying, because they're not draining properly. So they had to do something. And Gil said, look, I'm too busy for the next couple of years, but you should talk to these guys because they're next best option. So, which was extremely kind of Gil. But so anyway, so we were fortunate to get that. And I'm teaming up with Kyle Franz on a bunch of other projects too, because he's probably one of the best shapers in the world and one of the best eyes in the world. Because when Gil got the Rio 2016 Olympic course, the first call he made was Kyle Franz. That's pretty powerful. So I don't have a big enough ego where I think I'm better than everybody else. So I'm used to partnering, working with Ron Pritchard, Keith, a bunch of other architects throughout my career. And, we get along, we're best buddies, and he's so talented. So I think together we're going to really create something special there. And, but it's really about getting the trees removed, getting the greens pushed back, getting the ball running into those greens, getting the approaches firm, the ground alive, and getting the bunkers put back. They're pretty much 90% put back. Silva, like I said, did a great job. So we had to kind of finagle 10% of it, get more of that template feeling back, get the natives growing in these vast areas. So then once you cut down the trees, get the natives growing, then it's just on fire out there. And then the wind blows because it's up on the mountain. So it's a whole, revolving door of about 8 to 10 items that we're going to really hammer. And that'll break ground next June, July, and be open for 2023 May, and be spectacular, hopefully.
I have a questionnaire for you, which we always do with every guest. It's just fun golf thought stuff. We call it the 19th Soul. But before we get to the 19th Soul, I got one last question for you. And I think I know the answer because you just to hear your comments just there about going up against Gil Hans and all the great people in your industry. But you're very sought after at this point, and being younger, I don't think age means much to you. It's just about doing the right work. But what's going to matter most to you in your career? Is it, I've heard you say elsewhere that you want really lasting work, stuff that won't be redone in 10 years. But I got to imagine, being on your own now and having your name attached to things, that competition element, just as we talked about with Ross and all that matters too, that you want to have your name. Is it one and the same for you? Like if the work is long lasting and enduring, your name will be up there with the very best 100 years from now? Or what do you hope for your career? What is the main wish?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about my name, lasting or anything like that. And I always tell clubs I'm working with, Keith Foster always was brilliant about, he never wanted his name on the scorecard, because he wasn't that guy. And I always thought that was really classy. I'm the same way. And I don't ever want my name on the scorecard. You can have Seth Rayner or Ross on there, but it doesn't have to have mine on there. I'm not too worried about that. I just want people to play the golf course and think, wow, this is really good. And there's nothing I'd really change. It's about as good as it can be. And it's fun, and I want, the greatest feedback I've had from Beverly and some of these other jobs, Woodland. I just had a really great write-up in the Massachusetts Golf Association. They just had the Francis Ouimet tournament at Woodland Golf Club, which I redid last year. And a bunch of members just sent me this great article. They just wrote about how spectacular the golf course is now and how much fun and intriguing and, and everybody's challenged there. And they said some really kind words. And so I thought that was so nice from the Mass Golf Association. But that's all I want is I just want the members to feel pride in their golf course and be really proud of it and want to host guests. And, like when we go out to Beverly, I can't think of maybe but one or two things I do differently. I can't hardly think of anything I do differently, and when you ask any of the members, it's like, what would you change? And they're like, well, one bunker's a little deep. Okay, great. So if out of 98 bunkers, one's a little deep, I think we can live with that, and so that's the biggest gripe. I'm really proud. And so that's all I want is I just want these things to really shine. And I want them to see like how great Ross's vision was for Beverly, or how great Ross's vision was for Woodland up in Boston, or Green Spring Valley Hunt Club, the one on my shirt I just finished in Baltimore. There's so many people down there have just written me such nice letters and notes, about how their golf course has vibrancy again, and it's fun, and it's so different than it used to be because it's not overgrown and old and kind of worn out, and now it's just got this vibrant feel to it, and they just can't wait to play it every day. They can't wait. The tee sheet is just booked. And so I love that. That's the thing that gets me going. And, for these clubs calling down the line, It's the same thing. Yeah. It's great beating out other architects. And there's a bunch of other guys doing such great work right now. We're in a great renaissance now of guys who care a lot. And, because we went through that 70s, 80s, 90s where there was so much work, there was so much new work that anybody could just design golf courses and call themselves a golf architect. And a lot of the quality suffered. And then we went through that kind of whole downturn early in my career, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, where it kind of weeded out everybody. And I remember sitting there with Keith Foster and, Bill Core and stuff like that, and Corin Crenshaw. And I was just like so downtrodden on the industry, and they were like, no, this is the best time ever. You're going to be so set up for success. And I couldn't figure out what they're talking about. Like, there's no work. How am I ever going to like actually get jobs, and create a name for myself? And they're like, Tyler, there's not going to be anybody left. If you get through this, you're going to have the best resume of anybody under 40 or 50. So then you're going to get that next wave. And so it's kind of cool now seeing that, that wave is really, really finally hitting. And so if a club is looking for somebody under 50, there's really only 3, 4, 5 guys that I can think of that I know who are doing really good work. And if I'm a part of that situation and that conversation, awesome. That's all I want. I just want to look. That's what I always tell clubs is just give me a look, give me an opportunity. And then it's on my shoulders to showcase our talents and my team and what we can do.
It really is a remarkable story. And for someone trying to make his way in golf, it's inspirational, Tyler. It really is. Shows that with commitment, hard work, some intelligence, some research back investigation, you can, anything is possible. So thanks for talking with us. Now I got one last segment for you. It's the 19th Soul. Don't know if you're a regular listener, but we do this for everybody. We've had some interesting responses. Our architects always have a very interesting take on these, but I've adapted 35 questions from Marcel Proust, the French novelist of a past Renaissance in the 20th century. And his questions were attempting to reveal the truest nature of an individual. We're looking to grab the truest nature of the golfer, the soul of the golfer. So 18 questions for you, Tyler. They're meant to be quick answer. Mm-hmm. So you could take philosophical, but I know you got other things to get to today. So first thing that comes to your mind, let it rip. Tyler, are you ready?
Mm-hmm. I am.
Number 1, when were you the happiest as a golfer?
11.
Any specific time when you were 11 during that year?
Last time I had a hole in one.
Oh, wow, buddy, you're overdue. Number 2, what is the scariest shot in golf?
Downhill lie, tight turf, over a green.
There you go.
What do? Hybrid it, putt it. You putt it, it comes back to your feet. Oh,
you just defined a lot of shots I've been very ambivalent about at Beverly. So thank you for designing them.
Yeah.
Or bringing those back. Number 3, what is your go-to order at the halfway house?
Probably a G2 Gatorade and some sort of first tee or 10th tee bar, a little something to keep you going because I tend to bonk around 13.
Don't we all? Number 4, what is the trait you most deplore in your own golf game?
Bulky putter.
Number 5, what is the quality you most look for in a playing partner?
Hitting greens.
Number 6, what is the trait you most deplore in other golfers?
Trying to hit it too far.
We're all guilty these days. Number 7, what words or phrases do you most overuse on the golf course?
Get down. I say that a lot. Get down. Oh no. Where's that going? Get down or sit.
Interchangeable. They both work. Number 8, what golfing talent would you most want to have?
Great wedge game inside 130.
Scoring clubs. Number 9, what is your most treasured golf possession?
Ooh. I have some really old hickories that I've collected and passed down. One from my grandfather, which is really cool, and one has St. Andrews, one has Musselburgh, on there, Musselburgh links, I think, and then maybe some Pine Valley plates in the background. Playing tournaments at Pine Valley, you try to win a plate, and I think that's so cool. And you have to really grind because these guys are so good out there usually, and you have to play really well to get a Pine Valley plate.
That's great. Those are awesome. Number 10, we're making the turn. What's the one thing in your golf bag you should throw out?
The 2-iron.
You still carrying a 2-iron?
Yeah, and for the last year, once I hit about 36, 36 years of age, I can't hit it anymore. It's like a switch went off, literally.
Yeah, I retired mine 2.5 years ago. So I joined the club, man. It's 5 woods from here on out.
It was the best club in my bag. Literally, I could hit the stripe in the fairway. If we're doing half and half cut, I could hit it from 16 to 33. And I haven't hit a good one I hit one good one this year.
But that one good one probably felt pretty good.
It was on a par 5, and I hit it to about 2 feet on the par 5 from 270 or something. So that was the best one because I'll remember that for a long time. It was a tournament, and it was meaningful. But other than that, I haven't hit a good one all year.
Number 11, and we're going to remove your occupation of architect and designer from the answer of this question. But what is your favorite occupation in golf? Or more specifically, what's your favorite occupation at the golf course?
Mowing greens.
The mowers, the grounds crew.
Yeah. I always liked, I always liked cutting the cup and determining the pin location, flag stick location for the day. That is still to this day, I'll get up and my club has, luckily we have some app that shows you the pin locations because we have the computer do it, so it's not, nobody points fingers, but they pick some incredible pin locations in some crazy spots. But I love that, because I hate the monotony of every day. Oh, you go out there and pins in the front. Oh, pins in the middle. I love the crazy pins. It's stuff you never see. And I think it adds flavor to the game. And so cutting greens or, putting your heart and soul into cutting them and making them perfect, rolling them or picking fun flag stick locations. That always was the best job back in the day.
That's a great answer. And it actually, I've had through the Golf Society, you get to occasionally a venue or a host will allow me to set pins. What pins would we want to see for the event? And it's now dawning on me that that's just like the tiniest little sliver of understanding what it might feel like to be an architect and see people play your golf course. That this little decision of where the pin is, it dictates so much conversation in the clubhouse and so much dialogue that you probably feel that on the millionth degree.
Yeah, for sure.
Number 12, have you ever asked another golfer for their autograph?
Yes, I've had Nicholas and Palmer when I was a young guy.
And you got both?
Yep, got both.
Pretty sweet.
And Chichi Rodriguez, those 3.
Legend he is. Number 13, what historical golf figure do you most relate to?
Ooh, wow. Historical golf figure.
I thought this one would be difficult for you with your knowledge of golf history. I mean, but who do you most relate to in that bunch?
Well, there's, architecture, probably a different answer, but golf, probably Jim Furyk, because I have just a homemade swing. It's not ugly. It's just, short like John Rahm, but they always called me Furyk growing up, like everybody at every club I was ever at, and I don't have a loop or anything, but it's just kind of homemade, quick. And, but I do have a nose like Furyk, I guess. And when I wear a hat, I do look like him. So, or did when he was younger, but, so I got Furyk a ton. So with him, and he's local, he's a Philadelphia guy. great player. I've seen him shoot, we all saw him shoot 59. And then maybe golf architecture wise, that's so tough. That is so tough. I can't compare myself to any of those guys. I can't even begin to think about it.
I knew it'd be tough for you. Furyk is not the answer I was predicting, but I will go with that one.
Yeah.
14.
Underrated. He was underrated.
Oh, so good.
He's in greens, baby.
He's so good. Number 14. What is your greatest golf regret?
Gosh, that's the greatest golf regret. Probably not playing in a USGA event. Yeah, I pretty much have given that up, but I missed by 6 times. Like the USAM, I shot 138, 139 a couple times and didn't make it, like senior year, freshman year of high school or college. So I had some really great scores and just missed because there were so many good guys in it. And then the US Mid-Am, I missed by 1 or 2 a bunch. And the 4-ball, we had it a couple years ago up at Garden City. My partner and I were like 6 under through 13 and kind of just faded a little bit coming down the stretch. And like 5 under got in, and it was going to Bandon. We were like about to cry. So I haven't played in the 4-ball just because I've been so busy the last 2 years. I haven't played in the US Mid-Am qualifier the last 2 years, but having those 5 or 6 close calls, yeah, I'd love to play in a USGA event. Yeah. I'm holding out for the senior AM now.
Yeah, there you go. There's time.
Yeah,
the USGA and they're reinventing themselves it seems like maybe there's a mixed 4-ball coming down the road. Who knows?
That could be cool. I hope.
I'm like you. I couldn't do it on my own, so I had to go find someone more talented than me and team up with them in the 4-ball, and that got us in. So keep the hope alive, is what I'm saying.
I'm going to do that, I think, soon.
Yes. Let's see here. Number 15. Do you have a favorite golf book or a book that you recommend the most?
Probably. Well, it's very technical, but Golf Architecture in America by George Thomas. Very technical, but it shows you how brilliant he was. And he was thinking about everything. So Golf Architecture America, I think from 1926, it's a great book. And then probably Golf Architecture by Mackenzie is pretty good. And what else? I go back and read Golf Has Never Failed Me sometimes from time to time, like once a year by Ross, because it was a lot of they did find a lot of his writings in the attic. I think his nephew did in the 90s, and then they made it into a book. So I do believe a lot of it is true. I know Ron Whitten edited it, and I had dinner with Ron Whitten a couple months ago, and I was trying to grill him like, hey, did you change some things in this thing? And